The bottle is. Now listen carefully. They designed it that way. Your weeds are not the problem. They knew it would stop working in 6 weeks. That $12 spray you bought last month. The active ingredient cost the manufacturer 4 cents. Because a weed that dies forever is a customer they lose forever. The most effective weed killer ever documented requires no chemistry degree, no protective gear, no patent, and no repeat purchase. The weed in your driveway crack is not your enemy. The industry that sold you a bottle to fight it is. Monsanto's first Roundup sale was in 1974. Before 1974, American farmsteads managed weeds for 300 years without it. The knowledge that preceded it did not disappear. It was simply never mentioned again in any catalog that Bayer's marketing department funded. The Amish never stopped. It comes out of a kettle, and their fields are clean. Bayer, which acquired Monsanto in 2018, controls the dominant share of that market. It has been boiling on every farmhouse stove since before any chemical company existed. The global herbicides market was valued at approximately $32 billion in 2023. Monsanto built a $12 billion empire on the assumption that you would never think to pour it on a weed. Every dollar of that revenue depends on one economic principle that every chemical company understands and no advertising campaign will ever explain to you. Glyphosate alone, the active ingredient in Roundup, generated between $8 and $11 billion in annual revenue in 2023, depending on the reporting source. Every bottle in the garden center aisle has a production cost of pennies and a shelf price of dollars. The margin between those two numbers is the cost of convincing you that the kettle in your kitchen is not a weed killer. That is a liability. That is not a feature. Annual weeds return every season from seed. It sells subscriptions dressed as solutions. The chemical industry does not sell permanent solutions. Perennial weeds regrow from roots that chemical surface sprays rarely destroy completely. A thermal treatment that destroys the root of a young annual weed eliminates that specific plant forever. The Amish farmer who pours boiling water from a kettle on weeds in his driveway, cracks, and garden paths has never once sent a check to Bayer. The herbicide that kills only the visible plant above ground guarantees that the weed returns, the customer returns, and the revenue continues. The Amish farmer has no subscription to Bayer. He has never had one. He will not have one when his grandchildren are farming the same ground. He never needed to. Every farm always will. Every old homestead had weeds. Mechanical meant the hoe, the cultivator, and the plow. They considered weeds a management task requiring a consistent method. The old farmers did not consider weeds a problem requiring a purchased solution. The methods available before 1945 were mechanical, thermal, and cultural. Let me take you back to where every old farmstead managed weeds before any synthetic herbicide existed, and before any chemical company had a sales force calling on farmers at planting season. The old method costs nothing because it requires nothing that is not already on the stove. Every farmhouse that ever existed had a kettle. Every kettle ever built has been a weed killer waiting to be pointed at the right target. Thermal meant fire, steam, and boiling water. Here is the part every herbicide manufacturer hopes you skip past. Before I continue, I want to tell you that this video is the beginning of everything I have compiled. Boiling water leaves the kettle at 100 degrees Celsius, 73 degrees above the kill threshold. Cultural meant planting densely enough that crop canopy shaded out the weed seedlings before they could establish. The temperature required to denature plant cell proteins and kill weed tissue is approximately 57 degrees Celsius. At the moment of contact with the weed, the water temperature is still well above the biological damage threshold for any plant tissue. Iowa State University Extension documents boiling water as a contact herbicide, a method that kills the plant portion it directly contacts, working most effectively on young annual weeds, on weeds growing in the cracks of paving and driveways, and on any seedling that has not yet established a deep root system. The Amish farmer was never told that his kettle was not a weed killer. Nobody arrived at his farm to correct him. Nobody had any financial interest in correcting him, and so he kept using the kettle, and the weeds kept dying. All of it is inside the complete forbidden camping vault. The science of thermal weed control was not invented by the Amish farmer with a kettle. The tallow and linseed oil sealant guide that seals any wooden window frame for 15 years at $2 total. The charcoal water filtration guide that removes chlorine and dissolved organics from any well water for $1. 9 complete guides built for immediate action, no filler, straight to the knowledge they spent decades making you forget. The diatomaceous earth farm pest control guide that kills every grain storage insect for $2 a bag with no chemical residue. It was studied, documented, and confirmed by agricultural researchers at university extension programs and crop science institutions for decades before glyphosate became the dominant weed management tool. The full boiling water and thermal weed control guide for homesteads covering application technique, timing, weed species selection, and the exact situations where boiling water outperforms any chemical spray, and the exact situations where it does not. The Amish farmer does not read herbicide catalogs. He reads the weather, he reads the soil, he reads the weed species that appears in spring, and knows from his father's knowledge which ones a kettle kills in one pass, and which ones require the hoe. No chemistry. The thermal mechanism is direct and physical. It denatures the proteins that control cellular function. It destroys the photosynthetic apparatus in the leaf tissue. Boiling water ruptures plant cell walls by rapidly expanding the water content inside the cells. Boiling water at the moment of pour delivers 100 degrees, 20 degrees above that research threshold. Research confirms that stable delivery of heat at 80 degrees Celsius for the first 5 seconds is crucial to ensuring the most effective plant kill against any weed species. Iowa State University documents that affected plants wilt almost immediately after boiling water treatment, with plant parts in contact showing full browning within 1 to 2 days after a single application. The chemical company's sales force called on American farmers every planting season from 1950 onward. No one called to tell the farmer that his grandmother's kettle still worked. There was no profit in that call. No residue, no resistance development possible in any weed population. The product must create a condition where the customer returns. Every product in that section is designed around one commercial principle. They work well on established perennial weeds when applied at the correct growth stage. A weed cannot evolve resistance to boiling water any more than a weed can evolve resistance to being cut with a hoe. Walk through the garden center of any major farm supply retailer and examine the weed control products on the shelf. Roundup and its generic glyphosate equivalents are post-emergent systemic herbicides that travel through the plant vascular system to kill the root. Move fast, the heat is the weapon. Every second you spend walking slowly across the yard is a second the weapon is cooling. The weed returns, you buy the bottle again, the business model continues. No single herbicide application ever empties the seed bank. Every time you disturb the soil, which happens every time you cultivate, dig, or plant, you bring new seeds into the germination zone. They also break down in soil within days to weeks, meaning the soil is left unprotected against the next wave of weed seeds germinating from the seed bank. The chemical manufacturer does not tell you that your soil contains between 10,000 and 50,000 weed seeds per square meter in the top inch of topsoil. Subscribe and share this with every Amish neighbor, backyard farmer, and homesteader you know who has been paying for a 6-week subscription disguised as a permanent solution. 2 applications spaced 3 days apart will finish what 1 application starts. The second application finds a weakened root that the first application already damaged. The weed does not recover from that combination. Boil a full kettle of water. Carry the kettle to the weed site. The moment the kettle clicks off, move immediately. Every second between the kettle and the weed means lost heat, and heat is the entire mechanism. A full kettle matters. More water means more heat energy delivered to the target before the water cools. Squat or kneel close to the target weed to minimize the air travel distance that cools the water before contact. Here is exactly what to do, and every word of it is what any old farm wife would have told you over the garden fence before Monsanto had its first office. Stay here, because what comes next is exactly how the old farmers used boiling water effectively and exactly where it stops being the right tool. Because the Amish carpenter who uses this method also knows its limits and teaches those alongside the method itself. The seed bank in your soil is not emptied by any herbicide. It is not emptied by boiling water either. It is managed, seed by seed, season by season, exactly as the old farmers managed it before the chemical company arrived with a simpler story. Reapply within 1 week if any regrowth appears. Most annual weeds treated once at the seedling stage require only 1 application. Established annual weeds with slightly developed roots may require 2 applications spaced 3 to 5 days apart. The confined space of the crack holds the heat longer than open soil, giving the boiling water extended contact time with the root. Pouring onto leaves is useful, but pouring onto the root crown is the application that kills the plant rather than merely wilting the visible top. Hold the spout directly over the weed, not 2 feet above it, and pour in a slow, controlled stream directly onto the base of the weed where the stem meets the soil. For a garden path or driveway with scattered weed growth. 1 full kettle, treated immediately on removing from heat handles approximately 3 to 5 linear feet of crack weeds thoroughly in a single pass. For weeds in driveway cracks, patio joints, and sidewalk gaps, the exact application where boiling water performs most impressively. Pour the water directly into the crack and hold the pour for a full count of 3 seconds over each weed. Apply with precision only. Boiling water is non-selective. It kills any plant tissue it contacts at sufficient temperature. Applied in a garden bed with desirable plants nearby, an accidental splash will damage or kill those plants as efficiently as it kills the weed. After the first application wilts the visible top, the plant is weakened, and the second application reaches the compromised root more effectively. I need to be honest with you about the limits of boiling water as a weed control method, because the old farmers who used it understood its limits as precisely as they understood its strengths. The Amish gardener combines boiling water with hand-pulling for these species. The boiling water first to wilt and shock the plant, making the root extraction easier, and then immediate hand-pulling while the root tissue is still warm and the soil around it has softened. For deep-rooted perennial weeds, including dandelion, bindweed, and dock, the weeds with tap roots extending 6 inches or more into the soil, boiling water alone is less reliable as a permanent solution because the heat cannot penetrate deeply enough to kill the full root before cooling. It was built on the invisibility of the alternatives. Boiling water is not practical for large-scale field weed control. Boiling water has limited effectiveness on established perennial weeds with deep root systems. The $32 billion herbicide market was not built on the effectiveness of its products. For these weeds, boiling water is a preparation step rather than a complete solution. wilting the plant first, then removing the root by hand. For large farm fields, the hoe, the cultivator, and dense crop planting are the correct tools, exactly as every old farmer used them before synthetic herbicides existed. The volume of water required and the labor involved in repeatedly boiling and applying makes it unsuitable for anything beyond paths, driveways, patio cracks, and small garden areas. The University of North Carolina Charlotte Botanical Garden director confirms that boiling water kills the top of the plant quickly, which makes it appear highly effective, but without reaching the root, the plant will resprout. He generates no market data. Iowa State University still publishes it. He does not appear in industry revenue reports. The chemical industry did not eliminate the knowledge of thermal weed control. The Amish farmer who maintains a clean garden path with a kettle has no invoice to show for it. He does not receive a follow-up promotional email from buyer 6 weeks after his last purchase. The extension bulletins that once described boiling water as a viable contact herbicide for sidewalk and pathweeds still exist in land-grant university archives. It simply ensured that knowledge never appeared in the marketing materials that replaced practical farming education as the primary source of information for the modern homesteader. The chemical company built an empire on the assumption that the farmer would forget what his grandmother knew the farmer forgot. Now he is remembering. Now you know. The Amish farmer knew. The next vault opens soon. The knowledge was never suppressed. It has been since the first farmhouse kitchen had a kettle. Every kettle in every farmhouse kitchen is already a weed killer. It was simply priced out of the conversation by an industry that spent billions making the bottle feel like the only option. If this vault opens something for you today, subscribe and share it with every homesteader, backyard gardener, and Amish neighbor you know who is still sending $6 checks to a chemical company for a 6-week subscription to a problem that boiling water solves for free. The kettle is still on the stove. The water is still boiling. The weed is still in the driveway crack. The only thing that changed is who told you what to do about it and what they charged you for the answer. Share project content Kenzo kullanışlı malzemeler created by you video açıklaması .txt 124 lines txt metin 9. txt1 line txt metin 8. txt1 line txt